So we do want to celebrate the dads, the uncles, the granddads, the stepdads, every male role model that we have today, because it is hard yards when it comes to parenting. You want to hand on those good habits, those good things, those bad jokes. Like we didn't go down the route today of doing the bad dad jokes because we figure you get enough of them all year round. You don't need more in church. But yeah, it's hard to do that. And we do recognize that not everyone gets it right. And the good news, I think, is that when it comes to the Bible, the stories that we have, no one got it right. And sometimes it's nice just to recognize that. We look at stories in the Bible sometimes and we look for the good things that are there. And there are some amazing characters, and we'll look at a couple in a second, who did a lot of great things, but they didn't get it right in every area of their life. There's this expectation we can sometimes place on ourselves as parents, as people who look after the next generation. It says, I have to get everything right. And you're going to get a lot right, but you're not going to get everything right. A couple of characters in the Bible that we go, they're amazing, but they didn't quite have it together, and they're not exactly the best examples of fathers. There's four I just want to look at quickly. Noah, a story in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, that talks about when God wanted to change things. He tapped Noah on the shoulder and said, hey, I need you to build a big boat. Everyone's familiar with the Arky? Yep, all the animals go on. And then the rain comes down, they survive, and out comes everyone, and woo! Noah was picked. Did this great thing for God, and it was incredible. Look at what Noah has done. And then he was even in the Bible, it says he's declared blameless, which means he's without blame. He didn't do anything wrong. God saw them through the flood, and then when he gets to the other side, what does he do? Gets drunk. Gets blackout drunk, passes out. And then, worse than that, people miss this sometimes. Not only did he get drunk and pass out, his sons came in, and one of his sons laughed at him. The other son didn't. And what was his response to the son that laughed at him? He cursed him. So rather than forgive and rather than try to bring his son back into relationship, he further divided the family. Not the best way to start things again. Abraham was given 3 signs that God was with him. Hey, I'm with you, Abraham. I'm with you, Abraham. I'm with you, Abraham. Here's the guy who got the whole Jewish people set into motion. He took them from many, many gods down to one God. And he did something 2 times. He got nervous because he didn't want people to take his wife. And he didn't want himself to get killed in case they wanted to take his wife. So he called his wife his sister. Not 1 time, 2 times. Like you think you'd learn from the first time. So it's like God's trying to say, come on, man. David gets called a man after God's own heart. David, the hero who beat Goliath. David, the man who oversaw the establishment of this new kingdom and everything happening under the proper king. He went on, despite the fact he had wives already, he went on to kill a man to steal his wife. And he then just was a terrible example in that area. And he passed it on because his son, Solomon, who came after him, said 5 wives, that's nothing. And then Solomon went on and he had 700 wives and 300 concubines. I mean, like on one hand, like yay, nay, that sort of thing. Like one hand, you could get so much done, right? You could get so much done. But on the other hand, who has the time? Like, who is managing all these things? My point is this. These people did great things, and we hold them up and say, look at what God can do through people. Were they perfect in every area? No. So the expectation that you have to put on yourself that you have to be perfect in every area is just not there. The 2 things that they did do that they get commended for is, firstly, they owned their imperfection. At no point were they going around saying, I'm perfect, look at me. In instances in each of their stories, they recognize that they are not perfect, and it's only by God using them that anything happens at all. And the second thing is that they did hand something of value onto the next generation. Each of them gave something forward that was worth taking forward. They also gave forward things that weren't worth taking forward, but they did give something of value to the next generation. And what's true for them is true for you and for me, is that we will be remembered for 2 things. What we hand over to the next generation, because one day you will not be on the earth anymore. And it'll be up to your kids, your grandkids, your friends, your nieces, your nephews, your family to tell the story of you. What story are they going to tell? And the other thing that's going to be true is that one day we're going to have to rock up and face God and say, hey, here I am. So let's have a quick look at this little story that Jesus shares, because what Jesus reinforces for us and that we need to take away from this space is we're not going to get it right, but we need to be people who are going to try and do what we can in that space. So here's the story. It was read out before, thank you very much, by Sue. And it comes from a part of the Bible called Matthew. Matthew recorded the life of Jesus. And in chapter 21, where the story comes from, it's sort of at the part of Jesus' life that is very sick of the establishment at this point. So the things that happen in this chapter, there's a few things that happen. Firstly, Jesus gets welcomed in as a prophet. Jesus has been walking around, healing, doing a bunch of great stuff. He comes into Jerusalem and everyone's like, "You're amazing." And they say, "He's the prophet. He's the one God has sent." So Jesus is like, "Whoa." Then Jesus goes to the temple and he gets very, very angry. He looks around and says, "My temple, the place," and if you want to translate it to today's term, the church, the people that are meant to be doing God things, weren't doing God things anymore. So Jesus went in, flipped the table, got upset, "Whoa," and said, "Get out of here." Then he left and he went to cool down for a little bit. And then he got angry at a tree, which is a very odd part of the story. There's a tree, he was hungry, he said, "Give me some fruit." The tree wasn't ready, and he's like, "Nothing works here, nothing is as it should be." Now he got angry at the tree, but it wasn't about the tree. He was trying to say the people at the time weren't doing what they were meant to be doing. Then the chief priests and elders come, they ask him a question. He doesn't reply to their question because they won't answer his question, so he won't answer their question. That's a good conflict management tool. You ask me a question, I ask you a question. Well, we're not going to answer each other. Anyway, and then Jesus gave us two stories to describe the old way of doing things and then this new way of doing things. So in Matthew 21, 28 to 32, here's one of the stories that he tells as he's trying to drive home to these people. Hey, you're meant to be the ones representing God. You're not doing it very well. And this is what he says. Jesus said, "Tell me what you think of this story. A man had 2 sons. They can track so far. A man had 2 sons. Great. He went up to the first one and he goes, "Son, I've got some work for you to do. You need to go and work in the vineyard for me." And the son turns around and says, "I don't want to." I love that. I don't want to go. I don't want to do the work. I don't know the situation. I don't know if that's his normal job. Is he just being like, "Oh, why am I being asked by Dad?" I'm not quite sure. But he goes, "I don't want to." But then he has a moment of reflection and goes, "Oh, actually, I better. Otherwise, he's going to ask me to do more things." Or, I don't know what's going through his mind. But he goes, "All right, I better get this going because otherwise things won't go well for me later." Then he goes up to the second son. I'm sure he's gone to the first son. "Son, do the job." "No, okay, come on, second son. I need you to do the job." Goes to the second son. "Second son, will you please go and work?" He had commanded him, go and do it." And the son said, "Yeah, I'm going to go. I'll get it done for you, Dad." And then Dad walked out and he closed the door. He kept playing his game station, whatever he was doing at the time. So, I don't know if you know those people in your life. They say yes, 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 and then they don't do it. Some of you were that child growing up. You promised the world, but then you wouldn't deliver on it. Some of you had those sort of kids. And you go, "Oh, that's little punk. He says yes, I trusted him. The lawn's still not mowed. The gutters still aren't cleaned," whatever jobs you give your children. The dishwasher's still not unpacked. Trying to put on dirty dishes and the kid didn't do it. Anyway. Which of the 2 sons, Jesus asked the question, did what the father asked? And they responded, "The first." And Jesus said, "Yes, correct." So Jesus has everybody on board at this point. Hey, crowd, what do you think the correct answer is? The crowd are like, "Well, the first one, the one who actually did what you wanted them to do, not just paid lip service to it, but actually did the job, that's the one that did what was meant to happen." But then Jesus drops the hammer on them because he doesn't realize he's actually talking about them. He goes on, "I tell you, the crooks and the prostitutes are going to precede you into God's kingdom." So the people they're listening in are the people operating as they believe God has asked them to operate. And Jesus has come into the fray and he starts to disrupt everything. And these people think that they're doing the right thing. And Jesus is trying to get through to them. You're not on board with God's heart anymore. You've become so enamored by the ritual and by the tradition and the rules that you've actually lost track of what God is trying to do in this generation. And Jesus comes and says, "I am what God is trying to do here and now." And he's looking at this group of people saying, "You guys are meant to represent God." Some parallels to our current context, isn't there, sometimes? Like, you guys are meant to be the ones that show love. You guys are meant to be the ones that show people what it's like to follow Jesus, yet you're so distracted. And Jesus said to them, "The people that you will not accept are going into God's presence before you." He went on, John came to you showing the right road, and you turned up your noses. But the crooks and prostitutes believed him. And even when you saw their changed lives, and this would be hard for them to hear, even when you saw that their lives had shifted, you didn't care enough to change and believe him. So Jesus is there talking to this crowd going, you guys are the ones that are meant to be the definition of my love on earth, God's love on earth. And these people over here who you don't even want to get connected with because they don't come from the right part of the town, they don't do everything how you want them to do it, they're the ones that are getting the message before you. And when you saw the evidence of their lives being changed, you didn't even go, maybe I should consider God's doing something in that space. When they saw the lives change of those people, they failed to respond, and I think that hurt the heart of God. The people who should have acted the most like God were just so caught up in their bubble that they missed God's literal Son living on this earth. What they were passing on to the next generation in their mind was the rules, the customs, the story. But Jesus didn't want that to be handed on in that format. He had something bigger in his mind. So the question for you and for me is, what are we passing on to the next generation? Are we just copying and pasting our rules, our customs, our traditions and our experiences and saying, here's the weight we've had to carry and go on the next generation? Or are we actually thinking through how we hand on our legacy? Because the people that we take our history and place on to their shoulders, they're the ones that are going to tell our story. Because you and I will not be here forever. And one day it will be your kids and your grandkids, and they will say, this is what Josh was like. This is what you were like. And do you want to be the people who took this unmanageable expectation and weight of how to be, and do you want to plonk that in the next generation, or do you want to align with God and do what he wants us to do and hand something on to the next generation that's worth handing on? So here's three things I believe that we should be passing on to the next generation that actually aligns with God's heart for humanity. It's not the expectations, the customs, and the tradition. There's three things that we need to be passing on. The first thing is that we need to pass on to our children the fact that God is for them. We need to be saying to our kids and our grandkids, God is for you. Now, they may not be living in a way that recognizes that. That doesn't change the fact that 2,000 years ago, Jesus died for them, loves them, wants them. We need to be handing on a message that God is for them and God has more planned for them than they could ever imagine. God is against anything where people hurt people because he's all about relationship. We need to be passing on to the next generation. God is for you, loves you, sees you, and wants you to be in relationship with me as a parent, me as a grandparent, me as an uncle, auntie, family. Because that's what God wants for us. Second thing we need to do is take the cue from Jesus, and we need to be going, you before me. We need to be looking at our next generation and passing on this idea that we want them to look for mutual submission as the standard of how Christians live. Too much in the past has been about, I'm the boss, I'm the charge, I'm the hierarchy. And Jesus came along and he served, got low, loved people. Jesus' kingdom flipped the power dynamic on its head, and he said to the people following him, it's not going to be like with everyone else where you're in charge and everyone serves you. It's the other way around. You're in charge, you serve them. And we want to pass that on to the next generation. You are always looking for how to serve and love other people because that's what Jesus did for us. And the third thing is we want to pass on healthy relationships. We want to pass on good communication. We want to pass on healthy relationships with people. So what are you passing on to the next generation? And when you answer that question honestly and you think to yourself, what am I handing on to the next generation? What am I handing on to those people that I love? When you recognize what you are and what you aren't handing on, you'll be motivated to change because it's for the people you love. When Jesus came along, he didn't say, do it or else I'm going to come and smite you. Jesus came along and said, this is love in full demonstration. And it changed the world. So when we recognize what we're passing on to our kids, our grandkids, to the next generation, the people we love, it's going to be that love for them that motivates us to change how we live today. Because that lasts. That internal drive of love lasts. An external force of threat doesn't end well. And some of us grew up in traditions. If you've been around church for a while, there was an external threat upon you, which if you didn't do the right thing, behave the right way, follow the right customs, you were going to be out. And Jesus came along and said, you could do it that way, or you could come alongside one another and show them the heart of God is love. And that doesn't mean that you avoid the tough conversations. It means you actually enter into them from the right direction, the right framework, the right frame of mind. No amount of belief will make a difference in your life unless you put it into action. You can believe the right things about that sort of stuff. You can believe about the next generation should hear that God is for them, should hear that they should be serving other people, that they should be seeking healthy relationships, but it's not going to happen unless you actually do something about it. Jesus is amazed at two things in the Bible. If you read through the Bible, you see that there's only two things that ever impresses, amazes, or catches Jesus a little bit off guard, and it's about faith. Good faith or bad faith. Jesus was amazed at their lack of faith. Jesus was amazed at their great faith. Those are the two things Jesus gets amazed at. It's hard to amaze Jesus, but it's that. And Jesus constantly reinforces that faith is not just about believing the right thing, it's about actually putting it into action. When we put it into action, when we actually have the conversation, when we actually love the people around us, that's what impresses God. That's what makes him go, wow, you're listening to me. You're actually with me in that. Jesus spent 3 years of his life showing us again and again how it is we love other people. We feed the poor, we spend time with the vulnerable, we put others first, we seek humility, we exercise good leadership, and we trust God by developing a relationship with him. Now, if you don't follow Jesus this morning, it's not your space. Thank you so much for being here. What I want you to hear in this space right now is that I believe Jesus is worth following because he is the one that shows us what relationships are meant to look like. I believe Jesus actually shows us. Read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. If you've never read anything to do with the Bible before, go to John and just read the book of John. You can Google it on your phone or talk to me afterwards. I can get it on a device or a Bible in your hand. But read about Jesus' life and what he did and how he behaved. Jesus, I think, shows us the best of humanity because he shows us humanity in perfection and how it's meant to be lived out. But if you follow Jesus and that's your story and you love Jesus, that's amazing, then we need to consider what is it that we're handing over to the next generation. Because if our theology just means what we believe about God, if how we think about other people is formulated a certain perspective, but we put that before the people around us, then we miss something, I believe. Another way of saying it is that you're more concerned with what you believe than the people who are around you. If you're more worried about getting it right than being real, if you're more concerned with trying to make sure that you're okay before caring about the people around you, I think you're going to find you're actually in conflict with Jesus. Jesus constantly took time out of his schedule to meet people's needs. Jesus constantly came alongside people and said, I'm going to meet you where you are. I'm going to love you where you are. And it's not where you're meant to stay, but I'm going to love you where you are. And he didn't do it in a patronizing way or you'll get there. He came alongside them and genuinely saw them and went, I love you. But if our theology or if how we think about stuff, if we need to make a point and put the point before the person, we miss Jesus. And if you love Jesus, I don't want that for you. And I don't want you to take that and hand that to the next generation. God's Father heart for everyone is that true love is expressed through action towards others. And that is the marker of faith in God. Not how much you attend church, not how much you give, not how much you pray, not how much you read the Bible, but how much of that seeps into action and active love towards other people. I can't tell how much someone loves God by the way they say they do these things. It's only in the way that they love people around them. And you know that, right? Like there's people in your life that come alongside you and you go, there's something different about them. They're not just trying to make me believe something, they actually care for me. They actually want something for me. Those are the sort of people that we want to be, that can come alongside people and say, I love you, I care for you, I see you. Why? Not because I'm a great person, it's because that's what God's done in my life. I want to do it in yours. So, follow the Father heart of God. Understand that he is for you. Understand that he wants it to be you before me, others first, and that he wants us to have healthy relationships. And then take that, bundle it all up, and put it on the next generation and say, we love you. And it's our love that drives us to do those things. God, thank you so much that you have given us the example of Jesus. It's awesome that we get to celebrate you today at Father's Day, not just our earthly fathers, but you as our heavenly Father. But God, don't let us get distracted by the silly things that distract us humans. Like in this story, Lord, don't let us be the son that pays lip service and says, yeah, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, and then we do nothing. Help us be the people that want to love well and see the next generation receive this idea and these ideas and these things in practice that you are for them, that they can seek mutual submission, that they can look for others before themselves, and that they can have a framework for what healthy relationships look like. Not because we're great people, but because we have an amazing God. In your name and for your glory. Amen.